I have with me today Ambassador Xiao Junzheng, the Chinese ambassador to Israel. He arrived in the country in December of last year, and this is his first TV interview with any station. And I'm Maayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV, and I welcome you back to the ILTV News Podcast. And welcome to you, Mr. Ambassador.
It's my great honor to be here.
I want to start out with a question that is obviously very relevant to our viewers, our audience, and the Israeli people, which is how did the Chinese people view the October 7th attack? I understand that your country has actually refused to condemn the Hamas massacre.
Soon after the barbarous attack by Hamas on 7th of October, China clearly stated its opposition to acts that harmed the civilians and condemned violations of international laws. So the atrocities committed by Hamas are inhumane, unforgivable, and also outrageous. So China opposed and condemned what Hamas did on 7th of October. So this is very clear. At the same time, the international community is reflecting on why peace between Israel and Palestine has been repeatedly shattered. So China's position on the Palestinian question is clear and also consistent. We believe that the two-state solution is the only viable way to break the cycle of violence between the two sides. And we sincerely hope that the Israel and Palestine will coexist in peace, and the Jewish people and the Arabic people will live in harmony.
Now, while you say that, though, and condemn the act of Hamas on October 7th, Hamas is a terrorist organization and clearly not a partner for peace with the Israeli people, although the Palestinian people themselves may be. So how do you differentiate, how do you call for a Palestinian state with the people who perpetrated such an attack on October 7th?
It's the Palestinian issues, dates back to 80 or 100 years ago, so it's really complicated. I think it's one of the most complicated, international hotspots, not only in this region but also in the world. So I just want to mention that Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed the Global Security Initiative, calling for the settlement of disputes and wars among different countries through the political dialogue and diplomatic means. So, as a Chinese ambassador in Israel, I sincerely hope the Israeli think tanks or scholars could attach importance to this global security initiative. Maybe some of views or perceptions of this initiative could be helpful for our Israeli friends to find a right way or solution for this conflicts.
Certainly, and I do think that most of the Israeli people, certainly by all polls that are done in the country, indicate that if we could achieve peace, it would definitely be the foremost goal. Meanwhile, we have been fighting a war for 18 months on 7 different fronts, and war that now is escalating, as we saw, could escalate in the near future again in Gaza. Now, Iran has been behind a lot of this war. Iran funds terror proxies like Hamas, but also like the Houthis and Hezbollah, both of which, or all 3 of which really threaten the state of Israel. China has called Iran a strategic partner. How can you justify a partnership with a country like Iran, who clearly puts the Israeli public, civilians, as you mentioned, at such great risk?
Iran is one of the major crude oil supplier in this world, and with a population of nearly 100 million, and it's also a strategically important country in this region. So even the U.S., in negotiation with Iran, shows appetite for Iran's market. So China and Iran are comprehensive strategic partners. However, it's just normal state-to-state relations in line with international law and the UN Charter. China uses the term strategic to demonstrate the importance it attaches to relations with other countries. So in the Middle East alone, we have 17 strategic partners. So besides Iran, actually, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Algeria, and Bahrain are also China's comprehensive strategic partners. So China and Israel established the innovative, comprehensive partners in 2017. So we also attach great importance to these relations. So, I mean, if it is the will of the Israeli public to make China-Israel relationship a strategic one, so we are willing to make positive consideration.
Well, and we really appreciate that. I'm sure the Israeli government, when I say we really appreciates that, I'm obviously not representative of anybody who can create some kind of strategic partnership. But there is a question, I think, when we talk about a strategic partnership with the UAE or with Egypt versus a country like Iran, where most of the world has been talking about sanctioning Iran as it rushes towards a nuclear program that could actually really upset the stability in the Middle East. What is China's policy and position on the Iranian nuclear issue?
China oppose Iranians having or developing nuclear bombs. So this is a very clear position.
But when you send money and work strategically with Iran, doesn't that give them the funds to be able to develop those weapons?
This is a very clear position of the Chinese government. Of course, on the other hand, as a member of the international community, it is the Iranians' right to have its peaceful use of nuclear energy. But we made it very clearly. So we are the members of non-proliferation protocol. So we are against Iranians to having or developing nuclear bombs. So this is very clearly. And at the same time, China is of the view that isolating Iran will only exacerbate its sense of insecurity, leading it to wrong decisions and more unpredictable behaviors. So on the contrary, pushing Iran to integrate into the region will push Iran to act more rationally or responsibly. So which is in Israel's interest? China facilitate the Saudi Arabia and Iran reconciliation in 2023. This helped Iran's integration into the region and will ultimately, benefit Israel. So
how do you view this alleged Chinese, Russian, Iran kind of alliance that people speak about? What is China's perspective on that alliance?
Non-alignment is one of the basic principles of China's diplomacy, and it's written into the Constitution of China. Mm-hmm. So, as you said, there is a speculation about China, yes, Russia-Iran alliance posing threat to Israeli security. So this is equally absurd.
You think it's absurd?
Yeah. So China has consistently opposed, I said before, Iran developing and owning nuclear weapons, and has always supported Israel's right to subsistence and to development. So in our views, the only right choices for resolving the Iranian nuclear issue is through political and diplomatic means.
So do you feel good about the negotiations going on between the U.S. and Iran?
We think so. At the same time, as the parties that unilaterally withdraw from the joint comprehensive plan of action and caused the current situation, the U.S. needs to show political sincerity, act in the spirit of mutual respect, engage in dialogue and consultation, and stop the threat of using force and maximum pressure.
Would you sell Iran advanced military weapons?
No, I don't think so. China resolutely opposes the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and their delivery systems, and has continuously strengthened its non-proliferation enforcement capacity. So we firmly oppose the unilateral practice and double standards in the non-proliferation domain, rejects its use of non-proliferation as a pretext to impose illegal unilateral sanctions on China, which undermines and disrupts normal international trade. As a permanent member of the UN Security Council, China will maintain a prudent and responsible approach to the export of military items in accordance with our domestic policies, laws, and international obligations. China will implement strict and effective controls over all exports of military items.
So in the event that you would discover, and I think that we have, that Iran would use those weapons either against Israel or against Ukraine, or selling them through to Russia to use against Ukraine, would you then sanction Iran? Would there be any consequences for that action?
China firmly opposes any indiscriminate attacks against innocent civilians and unilateral sanctions that have no basis in international law or authorization of the UN Security Council. So sanctions never fundamentally or effectively solve problems. So the best way to prevent civilian casualties is not sanctions, but to push for de-escalation of tension and a return to the track of political dialogue and diplomatic solutions as soon as possible.
Isn't that already after the fact a little bit, though? If there's been acts that have been committed and you choose not to sanction or not to take any action against the player, would stop them from doing it again?
So if the sanctions is authorized by the resolution of the UN Security Council, as a member of the UN Security Council, definitely we will obey it and we will implement it. Actually, this is a diplomatic practice for China, and it happened several times before.
Okay. Now, I mentioned Ukraine, and obviously, there's been a very long and ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. You called the so-called alliance between Iran, Russia, and China absurd, which is fair. But China has said that they are not taking sides. Nonetheless, I understand that, already this week, that your president will be visiting Putin for a celebration of Russian military victory. So how can you consider yourselves neutral when the two presidents are meeting to celebrate a victory of Russia?
Yes, President Xi Jinping will attend the celebration marking the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War in Moscow, which is to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the victory of the world anti-fascist war. So both the Chinese people and the Jewish people are victims of fascism. It is very necessary to remember history. So we are planning to hold commemoration events in Israel this year to review the history of the Chinese and the Jewish people standing together through thick and thin during the World War II, and the story of Jewish fighter Jacob Rosenfeld, who supported the Chinese people during the war period.
And it is true that a lot of Jews actually escaped to China. Do I remember that correctly, that there were a number of Jews that were potentially even saved in China that came from the Holocaust? Am I remembering that correctly?
You're right.
Yeah.
I will mention it later.
Okay, so we'll get to that
right.
soon, I guess. You'll mention it later, no problem. So I want to also, take this question about foreign interference. If we move away from the neutrality question, you've been very, very strong about not wanting any foreign influence on the things that are going on in China. But isn't China a little bit interfering in policies when it provides these lifelines? I mean, we can talk about Iran, but also with Russia. Russia is under international sanctions due to its ongoing war with Ukraine, and China continues to do business as usual. Isn't that in some ways a move away from neutrality?
To be honest, only 45 of the UN's 193 member states participated in the sanctions against Russia, which were not authorized by the UN Security Council. So this small group of countries are in no position to represent the international community. Since the outbreak of the Ukrainian war or crisis, the Chinese side provided no fatal weapons to either side and has exercised strict control over dual-use items.
You've actually refrained from selling to Ukraine and to Russia?
Yeah. So the Ukrainian side knows this clearly and has publicly stated that weapon spare parts exported to Russia are mainly from the U.S. and Western countries.
Wow.
So that means China sold neither weapons nor ammunition to both sides of this conflict or crisis. So the China-Russia relationship is based on non-alliance, non-confrontation, and non-targeting of any third party. We are entitled to normal economic and trade cooperation, which shall not be interfered or restricted by any third party. China will continue its normal economic and trade cooperation based on mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit.
So let me ask you this. I mean, it seems that really a lot of what is driving China is economics, because in each instance, what I'm hearing is that we sort of compartmentalize. We as China say, we aren't going to give weapons to either party. We're going to stay neutral. We don't want you to develop a nuclear weapon, Iran, but if you do, we're not involved really in it. We're going to continue to have relations regardless of your actions, your funding of the Houthis, Hezbollah, etc. We'll have economic ties. Am I hearing that correctly, that it's an economic decision versus an ethical decision?
This is an basic rules for Chinese diplomacy. So if the UN Security Council passed the resolution in regarding to one conflict or wars happened whatever in a corner in this world, as a member of the United Nations, it is clearly and definitely we will obey it. We will obey it. We will implement what this resolution required. But, at the same time, there are so many disputes, crises, or even conflicts and wars in this world. Even for the Secretary General of the UN, he himself cannot make judge who is right, who is not right, who is illegal, who is not illegal. So there are so many, quarrels.
Do you feel the UN Security Council is non-biased? That you continue to say we will follow the UN Security Council, which is fine and good. I'm just curious, from Israel's perspective, it's been a very biased Security Council. There have been many, many more condemnations of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, certainly on the Israeli side. No condemnation in general, of Hamas's ongoing use of human shields, hospitals, etc. during this conflict, of which two sides are fighting. I'm not going to deny that both are fighting, but it's been very one-sided. So in aligning with the UN Security Council, are you in some ways aligning against Israel?
It is really hard for me to give you the answer on specific cases. But generally speaking, there is a common perception of the international communities. When we talk about wars or conflicts, first, the humanitarian is one of the important elements. Secondly, the justice. The justice is another important element, should be taken into consideration. And thirdly, it is in the interests of specific country or as small groups, or it is in the interests of the majority of the international societies or international communities. So I can give you maybe the fourth or fifth elements for us to judge which one is, correct or in the interests of the majority of the international community or not. So it's really difficult to say something, regarding to specific cases.
Now, I want to switch over to this whole issue of the tariffs that are going on. I mean, obviously, this is big news and impacting most countries in the world at this stage. The U.S. has levied at least a 10% tariff on all countries, plus this reciprocal tariff on 60 countries with the largest trade imbalance. What is China's view on this?
Yeah. I think maybe I would like to say something more about this question.
It's an important question for China.
Yeah. So the reciprocal tariff levies or reciprocal tariff, in our views, violates WTO rules, undermines the rule-based multilateral trading system, and disrupts the global economic order. So this is a typical act of unilateralism, protectionism, and economic bullying. So it will only lead to a lose-lose situation and harm the economic and financial stability. The IMF has lowered its forecast on the global growth rate of 2025 to 2.8%. So many economists and investors, or financial investors, including the Nobel Prize laureate Mr. Paul Krugman and the former U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Mr. Lawrence Summers, have pointed out that the imposition of extra tariffs by the U.S. will backfire and result in recession instead of bring back manufactured jobs. America claimed that its trade deficit is caused by other countries abusing the United States, but it is not the fault of other countries. it's a result of America's large budget deficit and the lower private saving. So the saving rate in the United States is very low, and most notably, the U.S. federal government is running an enormous deficit between 6 and 7% of the gross domestic product, $2 trillion of deficit per year. So the United States is blaming other countries for its own economic policies. There is no excuse for these unilateral tariffs.
Yeah, and I wondered, I'm stopping for a moment because I do want to give America's side of it, but I actually want to ask you, I mean, playing devil's advocate here on the other side, it does seem a little bit like the U.S. is struggling. They're not producing enough jobs, not doing enough local manufacturing, and kind of blaming other countries and saying, oh, we're going to punish all of you because we didn't do well enough. That's what you're describing, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That is definitely a perspective that I've heard,
I would like to share with you another reports. The Financial Times made in a survey, I think it's 2 weeks ago. So more than 80% of the Americans believes it would be better for Americans for more manufacturing. But only 20% of those Americans prefer to work in the manufacturing rather than the current jobs.
Right. I think it's a struggle. I mean, that we have a little bit in Israel in some capacity, in that there are certain professional jobs, that people take here, and then we don't have enough, let's call it less professional labor to handle certain things. For a long time we were using the Palestinian workers. We now are not allowing Palestinian workers to enter the country for the last 18 months. And they're working on finding workers in China, in India, and in other places who are willing to come and to do those jobs. But it's certainly a struggle. And it seems like you said that America, much larger scale, but is in a very similar position in that they want to have the jobs in-house, but there are not people necessarily to fill the roles.
Right.
Sure.
So actually, there's a joke, we said, as an American, he said, yes, I would rather wear Nikes than making Nikes. So actually, tariff wars benefit no one, even the U.S. itself. So the U.S. stock, debt, and currency have been impacted.
Yeah.
And the risk of inflation and recession in the U.S. economy will also exacerbated. So this double-edged swords has caused more damage to the U.S. than it expected.
But there is some wrongdoing, I think, also on China's part. I don't know if China will admit that, but, the U.S. has accused China, at least, of manipulating global markets, of stealing IP and enabling forced labor, which helps, of course, to bring down the prices. Is China ready in any capacity to admit any wrongdoing in this capacity?
China's development is not built on others' favor or benevolence, but on the pragmatic dedication. So disinformation can never distort facts or conceal China's great efforts. So since the end of the Cold War, the economic globalization has developed rapidly and generated opportunities for less developed countries. So, however, it is not like turning on a faucet and immediately the water flows out. So in more than over the past 4 decades of reforming and opening up, it was the institutional design, long-term plan, and diligence that helped China seize the globalization's opportunity and realize its development. Step by step, China built the most complete industrial system. Now the U.S. complains that it was taken advantage by China and has been in an unfavorable position for 80 years in the global trade, taking this as an excuse to launch the tariff war. But such complaints are purely groundless.
Do you believe that at some point you will negotiate these tariffs with the United States? Will there be some direct negotiations over this?
It is the United States initiated the reciprocal tariff. So China's countermeasures are based on reasoning, solid reasoning. So they are for maintaining China's sovereignty, security, and development interests as much as for upholding international fairness, justice, and trade rules. So it is exactly because China has taken resolute countermeasures that the U.S. had to postpone the new tariffs.
But the question is, will you go and negotiate directly and try to fix this?
When I was asked for these questions, I just reiterated that we will fight if fight we must. And the second sentence is that our doors are open if the U.S. wants to talk. So
you won't approach the U.S., but you're open to the U.S. approaching you for negotiations, in other words.
So if you studied any level of Chinese history, you would see that through the last 5,000 years of Chinese history, arrogance, coercion, and bullying does not work in China. So in my view, if the United States sincerely wishes to resolve the issues, so it must completely remove all the unilateral tariffs on China since 2nd of April.
So Israel's economy is also actually very tied to China's. And you and I were speaking before about how the top Israeli businessmen are all doing business in China. In fact, it's a very normal thing when I'm interviewing the most successful business people here in the country that one of the first places that they look to open up in the marketplace or to work with in some capacity is your country. And at the same time, China has actually invested very heavily in Israeli technology and innovation. There are many examples of us working together. Why do you think that it has worked out for Israel and China to be such strategic economic partners, which is where the relationship is, despite the challenges that we see going on between America and China?
Yeah. China and Israel have broad common interests in a wide range of fields, including trade and technology. So cooperation outweighs competition, and consensus outweighs differences. China has become Israel's largest trading partner in Asia and the second largest in the world.
It's only next to the U.S., correct?
You're right. You're right. So, as well as the largest source of imports.
Meaning that we're importing from China.
Yeah. So the Haifa new port, which operated in 2021, is a landmark project of China-Israel practical cooperation. So thanks to the advanced technology from China, the Haifa new port has become Israel's most environmentally friendly and automated port. Meanwhile, it has introduced health competition to the Israeli port market and improved the quality of Israel's port service. According to the World Bank ranking of container terminal services, the comprehensive ranking of the Haifa new port has risen from 196 to 56. So the excellent performance of the Haifa new port is a powerful response to various doubts and smears.
So I want to also, I think you mentioned the year that we launched diplomatic relations, Israel and China, but it's been 33 years that we have been having these relations. And I'm wondering now that you've been here a few months, where you see those relations going. And with that, I also want to ask you about Jews in China and whether or not there's any concern. First of all, is there a Jewish population? And is there any concern that you'll start to see rising anti-Semitism in China like we've seen in Europe and the United States?
As two of the world's great civilizations, China and Israel share a bilateral relationship that is young but also time-honored. Our two countries established diplomatic ties 33 years ago, but the earliest exchanges between us can be traced back to more than 1,000 years ago.
Wow.
So both of us have made important contribution to the human civilization and share many cultural similarities. Just like I said, Israel is a world-renowned startup nation and excels in making breakthrough from 0 to 1. China possesses strong advantages in capital and market, and is good at scaling from 1 to 100. So cooperation will apparently produce mutual benefits because the two countries have complementary demands.
I really like that analogy. Israel is 0 to 1 and China is 1 to 100.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see that exchanges and cooperations across the board between China and Israel have resumed over the past few months. I believe by working together, our two countries will definitely make great contribution to the development of the world. China has a complete industry system and enormous market and innovation vitality. So anyone who bets on that China lose, they will lose the enormous market opportunities of China.
So I think, with that, we're going to need to be wrapping up. But I think what you just said is a very interesting statement. Anyone who bets against China is going to lose. Now, the U.S., of course, and it's pretty much across the aisle, has been quite concerned that China is actually one of the greatest long-term threats to democracy. Americans believe that China wants to replace the U.S. as a global superpower, and that China is using this economic power that you just described in order to reshape the world in its authoritarian viewpoints versus the democracy. How do you respond as a wrap-up question to these accusations? Can you tell the U.S. otherwise?
Mr. Maayan, if you're allowed, may I add something? May I answer your question about the anti-Semitism?
Yes, I'm sorry that I jumped away from it. Yeah, but so please answer that, and then I would really like an answer to this question to wrap us up.
Okay. So I want to emphasize that there's no ground for anti-Semitism in China, and the Chinese government does not tolerate the existence or spread of anti-Semitism. So throughout the history, a great number of Jewish people fled Europe and put down roots in Chinese cities, including Harbin, Shanghai, and Tianjin, free from persecution. So even before World War II, the Jewish population in China already reached 40,000. So during the World War II, China opened its door to Jewish refugees escaping Nazi atrocities.
Right, as we spoke about earlier.
Yeah. So
So let's just jump away from it. So it sounds like it's a pretty safe place. I was more curious as to whether or not there were concerns that it could actually rise. But in your estimation, and it's interesting because I heard the same thing from the ambassador from Taiwan, that in most of these areas you don't see anti-Semitism like you do in in Europe or in the United States that it's much safer for Jews in areas like China, in Asia. I guess the only question is how many Jews are really there, right?
Let me share with you another two cases.
Okay.
During the World War II period, Shanghai sheltered more than 25,000 Jews.
25,000 Jews. Yeah.
More than the total number accepted, by Canada, Australia, India, South Africa, and New Zealand combined.
It's very impressive.
Yeah. And the synagogue in Shanghai, which is the telling witness of the time, was renovated into a museum now. Mm-hmm. We call it Shanghai Jewish Refugee Museum.
Beautiful.
So the museum is planning to hold an exhibition in Israel late this year, so sharing touching stories of the Chinese and Jewish people's collective resilience in tough times. Another case I would like to tell you.
So I actually do need to stop you at the cases just because of time, and I want to make sure that we have time for this last question, which I think is really the most important, because in the end of the day, there is so much rhetoric from the United States, again, on both sides of the aisle, about China being such a threat to democracy and to the long-term viability of democracy. And I need to ask you very directly, is China using its economic power to reshape the world into in alignment with its authoritarian image or not?
Thank you for asking directly, and I will give you a direct answer. No. It is peace, development, cooperation, and shared benefits that China always pursues. So the narrative of so-called authorization versus democracy is a false proposition. We strongly oppose drawing lines between ideologies, imposing a hierarchy on human civilization, or creating divisions. China will stick to the system and the development paths it has chosen, and at the same time, fully respect the independent choices of other countries. China will never export its system or engage in a systemic competition. China believes that peace, development, equality, justice, democracy, and freedom are the common goals of humanity. They must not be labeled as a patent of only a few countries. Drawing lines between values is not truly democratic. China always developed relations with all other countries based on equality, mutual respect, and mutual benefits. We treat all countries equally and with mutual respect. This stands in sharp contrast to the approach of some countries who form exclusive blocs and pursue geopolitical gains.
Mainly the United States is what you're implying.
Thank you.
So,
by the way, Ms. Maayan, please allow me to speak frankly. So actually, the representative of Taiwan in Tel Aviv is not the ambassador.
Correct. That is true. There is
she
no
is not the ambassador because there's only one China in the world. And according to the UN resolution 2758, there's only one China in the world.
You are correct.
This is he is the representative of the Taipei's representative office for cultural and economic, exchange, something like that.
You are correct, and I apologize for my misnaming it
it's okay.
before. You are correct on that. She is not technically the ambassador. Well, and you are, and I really appreciate you being here today, Mr. Ambassador. I think that I know you took notes and got very prepared for the interview, and we do appreciate that you were willing to answer all of the questions that we asked and to give ILTV the chance to have the first TV interview with you. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. It's my great honor to be, have an interview here. So it's my first, TV interviews. So I hope through your TV station, more and more Israeli people could have a comprehensive understanding of the reality of China and extends more support to the development of China-Israel bilateral relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll encourage people to watch.
Thank you.